So now we spent a lot of time talking about high deductible health plans. Let's take a look at what's happening on the PPO side. And one of the things that we saw is that PPO deductibles continue to march higher. What are the implications here, Logan?
Yes, I mean, it's almost the inverse of what's happening with HDHPs, right? You're in a PPO, you expect to pay more up front for less financial responsibility down the road. And we saw PPO premiums stay about the same, but now the deductibles have gone up by about 10%. So it's kind of that double whammy situation there as well. And obviously the distinctions between these two plans are definitely still there, but you can see that they're kind of starting to fade a little bit. And it kind of indicates to me, and we've discussed this at Benefit Focus, that it might suggest that in a few years, maybe even sooner, that one way or another, every plan that's out there is some sort of consumer-directed plan with significant out-of-pocket responsibility on the part of the employee.
Yep, and as Logan points out, the IRS minimum for designation as a high deductible plan is $2,600. PPOs are very close to that threshold today. Jeff, what are the implications there as you think about, for example, CDH accounts and an HSA account in particular?
Yeah, so I'd say a couple things. One, that it's interesting that 2421 number, so those are essentially like faux CDHP plans without the benefits of a CDHP. And then two, so certainly as, I guess with this administration, the one thing we've heard consistently is that they are going to drive more flexibility around HSAs and HRAs and things of that nature. So I think you'll see greater utilization there, but also to me, it still just comes back to claims data. I don't know how employees make a PPO versus a CDHP decision if they don't have access to their own claims data. And I don't know how self-insured employees are able to make these kinds of plan design decisions without having their own claims data. To me, it's just like such a fundamental thing. But once they have that, then yes, it's definitely going to accelerate consumer-directed plans.
And it really brings into focus sort of those lower income workers and the PPOs. And Matt pointed out this morning in the keynote that a lot of people don't even have $1,000 to pay for any expected out-of-pocket costs, and this is more than twice that. So there's just a lot of risk that people, even in these traditional plans, who probably think that they're covered, still have.
Now, at the same time, we also saw out-of-pocket maximums actually increase pretty significantly. And one of the conversations we had last night, Jessica, you pointed out there's not a huge difference here between the high deductible health plan and the PPO when it comes to out-of-pocket maximum.
There's definitely not, and I think when you've got a lower or a younger worker is most likely going to ignore the out-of-pocket entirely. They're more focused on what's coming out of my paycheck and what's happening with my deductible. But anyone who's a little bit more conscious, either they've been around this block a few times or they have their own health concerns, this it really blurs the lines and makes it much harder to make a good decision.
Now, we've talked a little bit about plan selection. We've talked a little bit about some of the costs that employees are seeing. The next set of questions that that led us to is how are they doing in terms of saving? Are they setting aside enough to prepare themselves and cover some of the costs that they might encounter? We'll start with FSAs, and we actually did see a contributions increase for FSAs in 2017. Jen, why do you think we saw an increase this year?
Yeah, so we still have a ton of people in traditional plans. I mean, we saw that just a little while ago. And those FSAs are still a great way to save tax advantage money to pay for those out-of-pocket costs. And as we just saw, the deductibles and out-of-pocket risks are almost as high as the HDHPs. So it's really important for those employees that are in those traditional plans still to have some of that money set aside.
And I'll just add that there's also been the shift to allowing that $500 rollover, and I think this was year two, and year two and year three, more employers are getting on that bandwagon of allowing that $500 rollover. So it takes some of that use it or lose it fear off the table. And I've also seen a big swing in FSA vendor offerings of integrating your claims data, so you have to submit less receipts so that you don't get your card turned off. I know that's like our #1 question. Why is my card not working? Because you didn't respond to the 16 emails and text messages So I think making the FSA experience a little more HSA-like encourages people to participate as well.
I couldn't agree more. I think we've all been at CVS at midnight at the end of the year buying a lot of Tylenol and contact lens solution.
Ace bandages.
Ace bandages, exactly. Now, let's take a look at health savings accounts. Sean shared some data today around millennials, and we'll dig into that in a minute. But one of the things that we saw was HSA contributions, while they have risen year over year, employer contributions actually offset those increases. Logan, what's your take on what's happening here?
Yeah, so I mean, despite the fact that employers, on average, contributed less to these accounts this year, you know, the employee contribution rose, and I think that's very encouraging. I think it indicates that employees are by and large, becoming more comfortable with these accounts, understanding them a bit more. Employers are, you know, communicating the value of them better, and you know, they're learning how to better navigate kind of this new era of healthcare where, you know, they're expected to take on more of the risk.
And we talked this morning about some of the investments we made in 2012 through 2014 through 2016 in the health savings account experience on the Benefit Focus platform. Matt previewed some of the investments we're making for 2017. Millennials made really significant gains last year in terms of the amount they were saving. Logan, that's pretty encouraging. Would you agree?
Absolutely. Very encouraging, very exciting. Jen, it looks like they're taking your advice.
Yeah.
You know, that's a significant increase for those, you know, that youngest subset of millennials, 20%. Just tells me that, you know, employers have done a better job reaching out to, you know, what's really the most financially vulnerable, you know, section of their workforce in terms of age. You know, you have these employees that are also, you know, battling student loan debt, and just to get them to invest in HSAs like that is very impressive, and it, you know, it affirms what we've kind of seen over the past couple years, this observation that millennials are really embracing their retirement more. They're focusing on that a little more. And, you know, while, you know, they may not be using their HSA dollars this year, this tells me that they understand the long-term savings potential of an HSA as a healthcare in retirement savings vehicle. And, you know, myself included, that pumps me up because, you know, people in, you know, mine and Jen's generation, we don't have too much confidence in Social Security or Medicare. Those are kind of unknowns at this point.
Super encouraging.
For when we retire. So, you know, we kind of have to do what we can now to kind of take care of ourselves.
It's really encouraging. I mean, the retirement industry has been putting out studies for years that have said that millennials are actually pretty risk averse. I know myself personally, I graduated into the housing bubble. I struggled for a long time with getting layoffs, and a lot of my friends did as well. We all kind of started over in our 30s. And so I don't really have any confidence that there's going to be money there when I need it most. And so just to have the technology and to enable people to save and protect themselves and their families, this is one of my favorite sides. It's just really encouraging to me.
Yeah, I think with the shift from defined benefit to defined contribution, we saw it on the retirement side, obviously, back in the 70s and what have you. And to me, this is probably the most powerful slide in the deck. Imagine if every employer could report back that their 401k contributions increased by 20%. Essentially, an HSA is the medical equivalent of a 401k, and so it's great to see that people are actually using the benefit for what it's worth, and of course also buying down and taking care of other things like student loan debt and what have you. So I just think this is great.